Well, as an everyday consumer, it's easy to feel a little intimidated, but did you know that Michigan law has certain basic legal protections for consumers here in Michigan? Here to give us a general overview of this topic, Attorney Tom Sinus of the Sinus Dramus Law Firm joining us this weekend as he does every weekend. And Tom, what's the basic gist of Michigan's consumer protection laws?
Great question, Derek. It's one of these areas of law that people don't think about until all of a sudden they feel like they've been a victim of unfair or deceptive trade practices. And that's really the heart and soul of Michigan's Consumer Protection Act. It is designed to protect consumers against a class of behavior that they may encounter in the course of just everyday purchasing of consumer goods that the law calls unfair or deceptive trade practices. So how do we get more specific than that? Well, in the statute, there are literally 30 different types of conduct that are described as prohibited as unfair and deceptive trade practices. So we can't, of course, go through all 30 of them, but the most common ones are things like charging a price grossly in excess of a similarly priced good, or misrepresenting the geographic origin of something. So saying that this is a wine from a fancy region of France when in fact it was produced in Michigan, or representing that goods are new when they've been either reconditioned or used. Representing that a part or replacement or repair is needed when it's not. That's a very common one, right? Because people don't necessarily know when something needs to be repaired or replaced. Failing to reveal a material fact that wouldn't reasonably be known by the consumer is another one. Advertising free goods or services without disclosing the terms or conditions, or taking advantage of the consumer's inability to protect his or her interests by reason of disability, illiteracy, or inability to understand an agreement. Now, of course, there are more, but that's the kind of general gist of the types of conduct that is prohibited under the Michigan Consumer Protection Act as unfair or deceptive.
It's good to know they're looking out for us. How's the law enforced, Tom? And talk about maybe some of the limitations that it faces.
Yeah, so of course it's not perfect. In terms of limitations, there are whole categories that are exempt from this law, whole categories of industry. So insurance companies, banks or credit unions, public utilities, or anything provided under a professional's license, like a doctor, a lawyer, a builder. All that type of conduct is actually exempted from this Consumer Protection Act. So that is one, I think, fair point of criticism about maybe where it's weak. What about in terms of enforcement? You asked about enforcement. Well, generally, these rules are enforced by either the Attorney General or a local prosecutor. And companies who violate these rules can be subject either to a formal request that they cease or desist doing that type of deceptive practice. They can also be levied fines by the Attorney General or the prosecutor. And they can, of course, be subject to a court order compelling them to not do certain things. And then there are remedies for consumers. Consumers can go to court and ask a business to stop doing something. They can file a lawsuit if they've sustained actual damages. And then, of course, there is the whole other subject of whether consumers can band together and form what's called a class action, which is a group of plaintiffs all together in one lawsuit. And that's very common how you see these type of Consumer Protection Act violations prosecuted by civil litigants.
Yeah, indeed. It is good to know that they're looking out for us, especially when you're buying stuff online and things like that. It can get dicey. Where do people track you down, Tom?
They can find us online at www.sinusdramus.com. They can shoot us an email at info@sinusdramus.com or give us a call, 616-301-3333.